All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good evening. It is a schos, Baruch Hashem, to be able to get back together, learn. I apologize, our microphone is not working this evening, so I'm going to do my best, Emir Hashem, to project, but please feel free. There's plenty of seats also closer, if you'd like. Begin by thanking our sponsors for tonight, to thank our annual Talmud Torah sponsor, the Tilson Mishpacha of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the shiurim and drashos this year as a zechus for Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. Our shiur sponsors for tonight, Mrs. Miriam Engelsberg, in memory of her husband Yitzchak David Ben Meir Aryeh Zichron Libracha on the occasion of his 4th yahrzeit, and Rena Walter in memory of her mother on the occasion of her 1st yahrzeit, Saul Victoria Bas Plata Nora. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, the families a nechama. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should Emir Hashem return all of our hostages. Our holy soldiers should be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedeihem, and we should truly be zochei Emir Hashem to see Besoros Tovos for all of Am Yisrael. So tonight we're going to do something a little bit different, because there are many things, Baruch Hashem, that we have to try to cover over a relatively short amount of time. So Emir Hashem, B'Shah Tov Mitzlachas, tomorrow night we have the Yom Tov of Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is one of these very mysterious days that we know that there's tremendous simcha, we know that there's a tremendous sense of elation, but yet it's not immediately clear what exactly the source of that particular. Also, if anyone needs sheets, there are sheets up here, and sheets, are there still sheets in back? No? Okay, sure. Good. All right, perfect. Here, if anyone needs, there's also plenty over here. So Lag BaOmer, we know that on one hand there is a tremendous source of simcha. What exactly the source of that simcha is, we'll come back to in just a few moments. And then, of course, Emir Hashem, before we know it, we are up to the Yom Tov of Shavuos. And the Yom Tov of Shavuos itself is such a multifaceted Yom Tov. On one hand, celebrating Kabbalah Satorah, the reception of Sinaitic, or the reception of the Torah, Sinaitic revelation, so many dramatic things unfolding at once. So what I'd like to try to do this evening is, Emir Hashem, try to create a common theme, really, between these events, to highlight the commonality between the Yom Tov of Lag BaOmer and the Yom Tov of Shavuos, but really in the Yom Tov of Shavuos, really focusing on it not as much at Har Sinai and Matan Torah, but a little bit more through the prism of Rus. So let's begin with number one. So this, I have to tell you, what I'm sharing with you now in number one is probably my favorite medrash of all time. I'm a big fan of medrash in general, but this medrash to me is one of the most beautiful, magnificent midrashim in all of Chazal. But first, a little bit of context. Remember, what do we celebrate on Lag BaOmer? What are we celebrating? So the truth is, there's a number of answers. As Ms. Engelberg just mentioned, the idea that's often mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch is the cessation of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, which of course is very strange. Why did Rabbi Akiva's students stop dying on Lag BaOmer? Why? Because there was no one left to die. Let's understand, right? At the end of the day, and we'll get to this in just a little bit, there was a massive plague that wiped out all of Rabbi Akiva's students. They're all wiped out during this particular period of time. And again, when we talk about the idea that they stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, according to most opinions, that's because all 24,000 had already died out. So Lag BaOmer essentially was the last levaya. So therefore, it's interesting because in general, when Jews celebrate, we don't usually celebrate because of the cessation of death or the cessation of mourning. Usually, simcha is associated with something positive and dynamic. So the notion in general that Lag BaOmer is about the cessation of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students is a strange reason for simcha. Now, the cessation of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students is a very good reason for what? I know that's an open-ended question, but a very good reason for the suspension of mourning practices. In other words, so the idea that Lag BaOmer, remember again, Lag BaOmer is very unique, but if anyone needs sheets, I think there are over here in front, I don't know if, okay, or middle over here. Good, it's like exits, all right, sheets here, sheets there, follow the illuminated aisles, you'll find sheets. So what's interesting is, remember, no matter what minhag you hold by Sfira, right? They call the first half, the second half, right? So everyone agrees that there is a suspension, either a cessation or suspension of mourning practices on Lag BaOmer. So I understand that, right? Because again, either it means Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying on Lag BaOmer, right? There was a pause, or they finished dying on Lag BaOmer. So in that respect, I understand why we're allowed to get a haircut, why we're allowed to shave, chasanas, music, all different kinds of things. I understand that. But the notion of simcha on Lag BaOmer, as it being related to the death of Rabbi Akiva's students, doesn't seem to make that much sense. So that's why if we bifurcate Lag BaOmer a little bit and understand there's really, as they say, tzvei dinin, right? There's really two pieces in Lag BaOmer. There's the suspension of mourning practices. So that's associated with the idea that Rabbi Akiva's students stopped dying on Lag BaOmer. Finished dying, stopped dying, and therefore we either suspend or end our mourning practices depending on which chelik of sfira that you use. But where does the simcha of Lag BaOmer come from? So the simcha of Lag BaOmer really comes from Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Who was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? We'll discuss in just a little bit exactly who he was. But one of the things we know that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was responsible for many things, many of which we'll touch on tonight. But one of the major things that he was responsible for was the authorship of what we call the Zohar, right? Or what becomes known as Toras Hanistar, the hidden dimension of Torah. In general, when we speak about Torah, we're used to speaking about two parts of Torah. Torah shebichsav, Torah sheba'al peh, right? The written Torah, Chamishei Chumshei Torah, and then pretty much everything else, right? Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, all of that is what we call Torah sheba'al peh. There's a third part of Torah, which we call the Pnimius of Torah. So contemporarily, this is very much associated with Chassidus. Pnimius HaTorah is the more esoteric side of Torah. Who introduced that to Klal Yisrael? Where did that come from? And the answer is it came from Rashbi. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the one who gives over what we call the Pnimius, Toras Hanistar, the hidden dimension, esoteric essence of Torah. When did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai give this over to his students? When? On the last day of his life, which happened to be Lag BaOmer. And in fact, Rashbi said, and I have to understand something. I mentioned this before, I think in other contexts. There's something fascinating. In the Gemara, whenever you see like a great Rav is on his deathbed, it's fascinating to see who's always around his deathbed, who's always there? His students, right? When we have this concept, like, when we think about the idea of, I don't know if this sounds like a right term, but like a good death, right? So what's a good death? We think about like Yaakov Avinu in Parshas Vayechi, right? He's surrounded by all of his children. Everyone is there. No one lives forever. So at least to know that I'm surrounded by loved ones is a comforting idea. And I think a way that no one wants to leave this world, but I think if we have to, that's the way to leave. But it's interesting that in Gemara, whenever you find a Tana Amora, someone dying, it's never their family who's there. It's always their students. Why is that? Because remember, Torah sheba'al peh, what we call the oral law or the verbal law, used to literally be that it used to be verbal. And therefore was transmitted verbally. Which meant that when the Rebbe died, right, when the teacher died, whatever he did not give over to his students went with him to the grave. So therefore, whenever a great Rav, whenever a great Talmid Chacham became sick, the students circled the bed because there was an urgency to extract whatever Torah they could before their teacher left this world. How did Rashbi spend his last day in this world? His last day, which was Lag BaOmer, it's his yahrzeit. His son, Rabbi Lazar, right? Because remember again, we know Rashbi because Rashbi again hid in the cave, hid from the Romans, miracle. The Rashbi becomes most well known for the concept that if a person devotes themselves to Torah, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes care of all of their material needs. And a person says, I'm devoting my life to Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will take care of all of your material needs. So I'll just point out, just as an aside, it's very important to understand it is true. If you devote yourself to Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will absolutely take care of all of your material needs. But that presupposes that your material needs are very basic, right? Remember again, Rashbi subsisted on water and carobs. So if you're good with water and boxer and you want to devote yourself to Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's got you covered. If you believe that devoting yourself in Torah, you're still entitled to drive a late model car, live in a fancy home, wear designer clothing, you can count on your in-laws for that maybe, but do not count on HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that. That is not the way it works. If you're willing to live with very little materialism, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I got you. High maintenance, get a job. But anyway, that's a separate discussion. So that's what Rashbi is most well known for. But the truth is, Rashbi's last day in this world was incredible. Rashbi calls over his son Rabbi Elazar. He says, Elazar, your job, you're like the stenographer. You take notes. Every single thing I say, you have to write down. And he assembled his prize students around his bed. And in that last day of his life, he transmitted to them the entire, what's called Idra Zuta and Idra Rabbah, what later on becomes known as the Zohar. He transmitted pretty much the entire Zohar to his son and to his students on the last day of his life. Now, lest you say, come on, it's impossible. How can you do that all in one day? Rashbi made a declaration. His declaration was, I will not allow the sun to set until I finish giving over all this information. Miraculously, the sun did not set for many, many, many hours into the night until Rashbi gave it all over. Hence the custom to kindle bonfires on Lag BaOmer. Where does bonfire Lag BaOmer come from? Because what does a bonfire do? A bonfire illuminates the night, reminiscent of the fact that Rashbi would not allow the sun to set until he had given over everything. So who was Rashbi? Who was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? So obviously, again, a Gadol Hador, we'll come back to that in just a little bit. Someone who stood up to the Romans and was not afraid to speak his mind, even in the face of tyrannical Roman oppression. A man who was moser nefesh. You know, the Gemara tells such an incredible, incredible story about Rashbi. The Gemara talks about the idea that after he emerged from the cave, he saw his son-in-law. His son-in-law was another great tzaddik by the name of Rav Pinchas ben Yair. And he saw that his father-in-law's skin was all cracked, that physically he had become so degraded from those years in hiding. And Rav Pinchas ben Yair began to cry. And Rashbi said, don't cry. He said, don't cry. Those cracks in my skin, that's what makes me who I am. Don't cry. Don't cry. The difficulties, the challenges, we don't become great despite them. We become great because of them. This was Rashbi. But take a look at number one. Before anything to do with the Idra Zuta, the Idra Rabbah Zohar, I'm telling you the most beautiful medrash you're ever going to see in your life. The medrash is as follows. Amar Ravidi. Ma'isa be'isha achos b'tzidan. There was a story with a married couple. Now, it's interesting because the medrash tells the story from the wife's perspective. So there was a story with a woman, a married woman who lived in Sidon. Sheshasa eser shanim im bailav lo yalda. She lived with her husband for 10 years, and unfortunately, they did not have children. So what happened? Asun gabei Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So they came to Rashbi. Why? Bayon lemishtafka dein midain. So she said, I want a divorce. In other words, we haven't had children. I don't know, is it me, is it him? But one thing is clear, which is this shidduch is not going to produce children. So I think we should get divorced. Again, no animosity, no anger, no fighting, heartbreak. The marriage did not turn out the way that we thought it would. So they come to Rashbi for a get. So listen to this. What does Rashbi say? Amar lahon, chayichon. Rashbi says, okay, I hear, but here's what we're going to do. The same way that when you got married, there was a party. You had food, you had drink. Kach ein atem misparshim ela mitoch machal u'mishta. You have to have a divorce party also. Okay, you had a chasana, and you had good food, you had good wine. So okay, you're going to get divorced. That's your decision. But you have to go ahead and have a su'udah before you get divorced. Okay, fine. So they listen. Halchu b'drachav. V'asuli atzman yamtiv. So this is such an incredible story. So the couple listened, because remember, there's no anger here. There's no animosity here. This is not like a shalom bayis issue. This is just a heartbreak issue. Sometimes life just doesn't turn out the way that we planned it. So this woman thought that the best thing she could do is give herself a second chance, give her husband a second chance. Fine. So they made a yamtiv. They made a beautiful su'udah. Vasu su'udah gidola. And they had a beautiful su'udah. Well, what happened? V'shacharto yoser midai. They drank a little too much. Kevan shenis yashva daito. So the husband, when he was able to speak complete sentences, he says, Amrla, biti. It's interesting that he refers to his wife as his daughter. He refers to his wife as his daughter, which on one hand sounds a little bit strange. On the other hand, also represents just like a profound sense of protectiveness that this man felt for his wife. So he turns to her and he says, Re'i kol chafetz tov sheyesh li babayis, utili oso, ulechi lebeis avicha. Essentially, he says to his wife, listen, after the Suda, you're going to go back to your father's home. Listen, take whatever you want. Just take whatever it is that you want from the house. Take whatever it is that you want. Whatever you want is yours. Okay? After that sentence, again, remember, he drank a little bit too much. He falls asleep. Ma'astahi. So what did the wife do? So la'achar shiyashan, ramza la'avda ulishivchosea, va'amr lahem, sa'ehu b'mita, v'kach oso v'lichu lebeis abba. After the husband fell asleep, so the wife motioned to her servants. She said, lift up my husband's bed and bring it to my parents' home. Bechatzi halayla, ninar mishnaseh. In the middle of the night, the husband wakes up. Now, sometimes waking up and not knowing how you got to your in-laws' house is a very scary thing in and of itself, right? So what happens? He wakes up in the middle of the night and he's disoriented. He's like, I know that I fell asleep in my home. How am I waking up in my in-laws' house? Kevan defag chamre, when the effects of the wine wore off a little bit, Amar la biti hechan ani nason. So he's confused. The husband is confused. He says to his wife, where am I? Amar le bebeis abba. You're at my parents' house. Amar la ma'li bebeis avicha. Why am I at your parents' house? Amar le, she said to him, V'lo kach amarta li ba'erev. Do you remember what you said to me before? Kol chefetz tov sheyesh bebeisi tili oso ulechi lebeis avicha. Remember you told me that I could take whatever I desire most from the house and take it with me as I go on to this next chapter. She says to him, listen to these words. Ein chefetz tov li ba'olam yoser mimecha. I have nothing better in this world than you. So she took him home. So what happens the next day? So the next day they come back to Rashbi. And what happened? Va'amad v'hispalel aleihem v'nifkedu. Rashbi, again, obviously they're not getting divorced. Rashbi davened for them, and Baruch Hashem, they were blessed later on with a child. A tremendous story. But what is it? Right? Obviously, Rashbi had a plan, right? He obviously this was a setup. But what exactly was it that was unfolding over here? So if you take a look at number 2, I saw this quoted in the name of the Balatanya. The Balatanya of Shner Zalman of Liadi, right? The founder of Lubavitch, the founder of Chabad Chasidus. So this Perush was quoted in his name. It's not found in Tanya. I don't know. Like I said, I saw it quoted in different seifers. Look what he writes. He says Ber Hadvar Mukach. So what? Rashbi obviously understood what was going to go on over here. So what was it? What happened? What unfolded? It says incredibly. He says, when this couple originally came to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, ha'ava shelahem zelazeh haisa musnis. This is an incredible phrase. Rashbi saw that when this couple came before him, what he noticed was their love was conditional. In other words, their love for one another was strong, but it was rooted in a condition, like a tanai. This means like a tanai, a condition. What was the condition? We're together as long as what? In other words, as long as we could live a normal life together. Like in other words, which means in this context, having a child. So he saw that there was strong love there, but it was a conditional love. He haisa mumukedes matara. This woman, and presumably the man as well, although it's interesting because in the Medrash, in the story, fascinatingly enough, it's not the husband driving this process, it's the wife. So Rashbi understood that she had mukeres matara, she had a purpose, which makes sense. She wanted to be a mother. She wanted to have a family. So therefore, again, I love my husband, but if the marriage didn't bring a child, B'sofo shel davar ein bahem tam. Then what's the point? Of course I love you, but at the end of the day, I'm in this for a reason. And if the reason is not going to materialize, then perhaps we are just better off going our own way. Aval az Kishem amdu lihi pared. But then something amazing happened. In that moment when they were literally going to divorce, in that moment where they were going to separate, Hem gilu ad kama hem kshurim zelazeh. It's only in that moment, that night before the divorce, that they actually discovered how profoundly connected they were to one another. They began to understand that there was a power to their love, there was a power to their marriage, there was a power to their relationship that was independent of any other result. Rashbi understood that there was a powerful love, but it was stunted. It was stunted because, at least in the eyes of this couple right now, it was a love that was there in order to produce a result. And if the result can't come about, then what's the point of the love? And then over the course of that party, and when he says to his wife, at the end of the day, take whatever you want, and she looks around, right? Can you imagine, like she looks around and she sees sounds like they had money, right? Because she's got servants, she's right there. So they had what to desire. She looks down and she says, at the end of the day, I don't want anything else in this world but you. So she discovered that they had a true and profound love that was not rooted in anything, that didn't need to materialize in some type of result. After this discovery, essentially of an unconditional love, of a love not because I want to bring about some result, not because I need to achieve some purpose, but just a wholehearted love. So they came back to Rashbi, right? The next morning they come back to Rashbi. Now, if you notice, by the way, they come back, right? The Medrash doesn't record what they said or what they did, nor does the Medrash say that they came back to Rashbi, they just said, we decided to stay married, can you daven for us for a child? They came back. Why did they come back to Rashbi? Why did they come back? Why did they come back? Because they were showing him that they understood what he did and he was right. That they misunderstood the depth of the love they really possessed. And our love is not just a utilitarian love to bring about some result. But at the end of the day, our love is without conditions. And our love is a wholehearted one. And our love is a full-throttled commitment that is just to be together. Produces a child, doesn't produce a child. That's not what this love was about. So they never asked Rashbi for anything. But the Medrash says, Rashbi davened for them. Why? This is incredible. V'apam, ki lo haya lahem pitaron, elakim yadu shem rotzim lihios biyachad, lilo shum tinoim. They came back to Rashbi, and they didn't have to articulate anything. Their faces said it all. Their love said it all. We want to be together without conditions. Without conditions. Children, no children, life goes our way, doesn't go our way, we're in this together. And the moment that happened, but often paradoxically, dafka kasher him eschilu lahavin es Torah ava she'in la mania nistar, hayachasim beinehem nisnas uperi. And then what happened? The moment that love became unconditional, that's when the brachos really came about. See, Rashbi understood that sometimes the thing that stands between us and bracha is a lack of complete commitment. The problem with this couple was not that they didn't have children. The problem with the couple that Rashbi sensed is that they did not have a complete and unqualified and unadulterated love and commitment for each other. When that commitment is not complete, then the beautiful brachos cannot materialize. But if you're all in, no matter what, if you're committed, no matter what, if I love you and you love me, whether we get the results that we want or don't get the results, but we're in this together, that's when bracha comes about. Rashbi sees this newly minted, newly committed love, and he davens for them to have a child. And again, the Medrash ends off with tremendous, tremendous bracha. So Rashbi is the one who understood. And this is really, I think, when you distill it down, the tremendous essence of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that if you want to be successful in anything in life, you have to put complete commitment into it. If you want to be successful, there can't be a big toe in and the rest of my foot out. Anything you want in life, whether it's marriage or anything else, ruchnius or gashmius, if you want success, there has to be unadulterated, unwavering commitment. Where did Rashbi get this koach from? So remember, and this is really incredible, because often, as you mentioned before, right, Lag BaOmer has these two parts to it. There's on one hand, the yard site of Rashbi, but on the other hand, there's also the cessation of death of Rabbi Akiva's students. What people often don't understand is the tremendous linkage between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yisrael Bar Yochai. What was their link? Take a look at source number 3. The Gemara Maseches Bracha says as follows: Rabbi Akiva Omer, Lama Torah bi'alduso, Yom Torah b'ziknuso. A very profound Gemara. If a person learned Torah when they're young, you should continue to learn Torah even when you're old. How you tamidim bi'alduso, you tamidim b'ziknuso. If you created students when you were young, also create students when you're old. Now, what is Rabbi Akiva saying? That no matter how much you've accomplished in life, always accomplish more. Always do more. He quotes the pasuk from Klal Shnei Emar. If you take a look, the whole pasuk is in source number 4. Then we'll go back to number 3 in just a moment. Baboker zara es zarecha. In the morning, plant your seeds. Vela erev atanach yadecha. But in the evening, don't withhold your hand. Ki eincha yodea eza yichshar. Hazeh ozeh. Because in life, you never really know which efforts are going to yield fruit. Right? You never know in life, like, where is your success going to come? So therefore, Shalom Aleichem says in Koheles, essentially, keep doing, keep accomplishing. You sow seeds in the morning, sow seeds in the evening. Keep planting, keep doing. Because in life, you never know what's going to take. You never know what's going to flourish. Will this planting take? Will that planting take? And if everything you plant takes root, even better. So go back to number 3. So Rabbi Akiva says, therefore, even if you learn Torah when you're young, learn Torah when you're old. You make students when you're young, make students when you're old. Because in life, you never really know which of your efforts will be sustained. So how do you know because I don't know which efforts will be sustained, therefore, keep doing, keep accomplishing, keep growing, keep putting in effort. Something will last. Something will endure. Now, Rabbi Akiva didn't just say this, he lived it. Here's the famous story. Amru. Back to source number 3, second line in. 12,000 zugim talmidim hayulol Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva had 12,000 pairs of students, 24,000 students. Migvas adan tippers, from one end of Eretz all the way to the other. And what happened? V'kulon mesu b'perek echad, mipnei shelo nagu kavod zelazeh. They all died during the same time frame. Why? Because they did not go ahead and give kavod one to the other. Now, we could spend a whole shiur discussing what does that mean, right? What's not our topic for tonight. Point, v'haya olam shamei. Now understand, who were these 24,000 people? Who were they? They were the best and the brightest. They were the elite. They were the future leaders of Klal Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva was the Gadol Hadar. Rabbi Akiva was the beacon of light, of hope, of optimism for Klal Yisrael. And we would assume that his students had those same midos. 24,000 students. Essentially, an entire generation of Talmidei Chachamim wiped out. And that's why the Gemara says, the world was desolate. There was an existential danger for the future of Klal Yisrael. What did Rabbi Akiva do? Rabbi Akiva went to the rabbis in the south. Who were they? Essentially what Rabbi Akiva does is he establishes 5 new students. 5 new students. So you have to understand something here for just a moment, right? We know about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva did not have an easy life. Ignorant until the age of 40. Goes to learn, right? So we think about Rabbi Akiva, like, wow, Rabbi Akiva. Do you know Rabbi Akiva was treated during his lifetime? Like a piece of garbage. Literally like a piece of garbage. Okay, he achieves great fame a couple of decades after he's been in yeshiva. But Rabbi Akiva suffered much during his life. His wife Rachel suffered even more than he did. Rabbi Akiva suffered throughout life. He had a really difficult life. And remember, put on top of that, Rabbi Akiva lived through the Churban. He lived through Hadrianic persecution, right? Rabbi Akiva is murdered by the Romans, right? Rabbi Akiva's entire life is turbulence. And then, just understand, So now Rabbi Akiva, you go from ignorant shepherd to Gadol Hador. You have a yeshiva of 24,000 students. 24,000 students. It's a big yeshiva. 24,000 students. And you lose everyone in a matter of weeks. What's the natural reaction to something like that? I give up. I don't know what you want from me, but whatever you want from me, like I'm out. I'm out. Like I don't know what else I could possibly give. I don't know. Like you know, we know the stories of Rabbi Akiva when he was young. You know, when Rabbi Akiva got married, he was so poor. Remember, even though he married the richest girl in Klal Yisrael, but remember again, her father. Remember, Rachel's father was a man by the name of Kalba Savua. Now, Kalba Savua is not a very popular child's name, right? It literally means satiated dog, right? So again, it's not on the top of the list. Remember, because it wasn't his real name, it was his descriptive name. Kalba Savua fed every single poor person that came to his home. Yet, he disowned his own daughter. So, there's a moving Gemara that Rabbi Akiva and Rachel, they didn't have a mattress. They slept on straw. And the Gemara tells a story that in the morning, young Akiva, his name Rabbi Akiva, Akiva would pick out the straw from Rachel's hair. Every morning he would pick out Chassan and Kala, pick out the straw of Rachel's hair. And he promised, he said, one day, if we have money, I will buy you a Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. Yerushalayim Shel Zahav was like a beautiful brooch, like a pin that wealthy girls used to wear. This is Rabbi Akiva's life from the beginning. Difficulty, privation, humiliation, and now finally, he's the Gadol Hadar, right? 24,000 Talmidim. And literally in a matter of weeks, 33 days to be exact, 32 days, he loses everything. What does he do? What does Rabbi Akiva do? You have to understand, he pulls himself together. The Gemara says he goes down to the south. Now, when did he go down to the south? Remember, the last Levaya was probably today, or what'll be tonight, right? The 32nd day of the Omer. And the last Levaya, and then he goes ahead and he finds 5 new Talmidim. And by the way, who are the 5 new Talmidim? V'shan Alahem, who were they? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the Talmid of Rabbi Akiva. But he wasn't just any Talmid, he was one of the last or the new 5. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is part of the last cohort, the new cohort of Rabbi Akiva's Talmidim. That's who Rashbi is, one of the new 5. So you have to understand what Rabbi Akiva did and the strength of character. So Rabbi Akiva, after literally, again, 33 days of Levayas. So just so you understand what that means, right? 33 days of funerals, 24,000 students dead means thousands of widows, probably tens of thousands of orphans who are now the responsibility of Rabbi Akiva. They're his responsibility. After he finishes with all of the Nichum Avelim, all of the Levayas, he pulls himself together. He says, the dream has to go on. The vision has to be perpetuated. Klal Yisrael has to be built. Torah has to have a future. And Rabbi Akiva was so profoundly and singularly committed to this vision that he puts aside his own suffering, his own tragedy, his own sadness, and he moves forward. And who does he find? Rashbi. So Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Rebbe, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Rebbe is Rabbi Akiva. You know, there are many things that we learn from our Rebbeim. Truth is, most of us don't remember all of the things that we learned from our teachers, but usually we remember certain key concepts. I'm sure Rashbi remembered everything from Rabbi Akiva, but there's no doubt that the core lesson that he received from his Rebbe was whatever you're going to do in life, you must be singularly dedicated to the execution and actualization of that vision. If you're gonna be committed all the way. Rabbi Akiva, you are committed to building Klal Yisrael. So even when you lose everything, what do? You start again. So Rashbi, and now when you understand this, right? When you understand what's happening over here, you understand the Medrash a little bit more as well. So Rashbi, this couple comes to Rashbi, they want to get divorced. Rashbi says, you don't want to get divorced. You just don't really understand what marital love is. You don't understand what it means to be in a committed relationship. And what it means to be in a committed relationship is you're in and you're committed no matter what. And it's not about the actualization of a particular result. And it's not about getting exactly what you want, how you want, when you want it. It's about being fully committed to the love in this marriage. Where does he get that yesod from? Of complete commitment to something? From his Rebbe, Rabbi Akiva. And this, I think, becomes one of the most incredible and dominant yisodos. And by the way, now you also understand on Lag BaOmer how incredible it is that like the two components, there's an incredible amount of intersectionality over here, right? Because remember, again, we started by saying the cessation of the morning practices that occurs on Lag BaOmer, that's related to Rabbi Akiva and his students. The Simcha is the yahrzeit of Rashbi, but they're very much connected because Rabbi Akiva and Rashbi are joined at the soul. They're Rebbe and Talmud, right? Remember, the continuity of Rabbi Akiva comes from Rashbi, and the Rashbi was only created because of Rabbi Akiva. So like BaOmer has this incredible like joint spiritual avoda of these two incredible luminaries. And it's almost as if what Rashbi says is, if you take the hashkaf of Rabbi Akiva and you remain singularly devoted to whatever your life vision is, you will be successful. And not only will you be successful, but you will even be able to dispel the darkness. You'll even be able to illuminate the light. If you remain committed to your dreams, remain committed to your vision, remain committed to the important things in your life, and don't give up when it becomes a little bit difficult, and don't throw the towel in when it becomes a little bit challenging, then at the end of the day, you will be successful in whatever you put your mind to. Just understand, the proof, how do we know that they're right? How do we know that they're right? How do we know that Rabbi Akiva and Rashbi are right? Because 2,300 years later, we are still learning about, we're going to have Lag BaOmer tomorrow night, right? And in Mirat Hashem, we are going to be lighting a bonfire in our brand new, I hope you noticed our beautiful new parking lot, right? We're going to be kindling a bonfire, Madura, in our parking lot, 6,000 miles away from our ancestral homeland, because we are still in Gullus after 2,000 years. But even with Gullus, and even with difficulty, and even with hostages, and even with war, nothing stops the vision of Klal Yisrael. Nothing stops our commitment. Where does that come from? And like BaOmer, we say, you know where it comes from? It comes from Rabbi Akiva. It comes from Rashbi. Now, in fairness, it comes from many before Rabbi Akiva and Rashbi. It comes from Sari Imenu and Avram Avinu as well. We have a long line of people like this. But like when you think about seminal personalities that endowed our people with this like hashkaf of commitment, it's Rabbi Akiva and Rashbi. And that's the celebration of Lag BaOmer. And the truth is, it spreads to Shavuos as well. Turn the page. Take a look at source number 5. We see, by the way, this idea, we see very much in Megillas Rus as well, right? I always find that one of the greatest challenges in general that we have, like with Megillas, besides Esther, because Megillas Esther we get to read twice, but I always find like the biggest challenge we have with our Megillas is that we read them once, and generally like they're buried in something else, right? So we read Koheles, we read Koheles on Sukkot, we read Shir on Pesach. So right, this year Pesach, we read Shir on Shabbos Cholamoid Pesach. Davening was like 14 hours, right? So already like as it is, I'm like, all right, Challah was beautiful, but now I'm like, Shir, there's still a Musaf, there's going to be a drasha, there's going to be all this stuff, and like it's hard, and especially Shir, you can't get Shir for sure, bless you can't in general ingest it all at once. Koheles you can, and Rus is much the same way, because the story of Rus, on so many levels, makes absolutely no sense. It makes no sense how a Moabite princess, who essentially had just a terrible life, would choose to go ahead and join the ranks of Klal Yisrael. It doesn't make any sense. She was marginalized, she was peripheralized, she was an outcast. Remember again, Rus comes back to Beis Lechem with Naomi. We know the story, right? Machlon and Kilion, the husbands of Rus and Arpa, die. So remember again, now the two girls, Arpa, to her credit also, are walking back with Naomi. And it's important to understand, Arpa gets a little bit of a bad rap, but just let's understand, had Naomi not said anything, Arpa would have gone with her also. Naomi's very insistent, don't come. So Arpa goes back. and Rus stays. And Rus stays. And if you take a source if you look at number 5, so Vatomar. So Naomi says to Rus, and again, this is not like Naomi being, sometimes someone says to you, oh, you don't have to. But really what they're saying is you do have to, right? But Naomi's really saying like, I don't want you to come. I do not want you to come. Understand, Naomi knew what was waiting for in Eretz Yisrael. Because remember, Naomi was also an outcast. She was also an outcast. Because Naomi and Elimelech were very wealthy. They left Eretz Yisrael in the height of regional famine because they did not want to have to give tzedakah. They went to Moab to preserve their wealth. They abandoned Klal Yisrael in a time of need. They lived in Beis Lechem. Beis Lechem is where Jewish aristocracy, leadership lived. They had a position of prominence. And we know this because when Naomi comes back, right, how many Shabbos invitations did Naomi get? Zero. How many Avas Yisrael packages did Naomi get? Zero. Nothing. No one is knocking on her door. No one is looking after her. No one cares about Naomi. Had it not been for us, Naomi would have just died in her house. Right? She would have been one of these people. She would have died in her house. Somebody would have discovered her sometime later on, and that would have been it. That would have been the story. And same thing with Rus. So no one say, "Oh, it's so nice you converted. That's so beautiful. Come, tell us your story." No one cares about her. No one wants anything to do with her. But compounded by the fact that also she's Moabite, so there's a whole discussion of that. Do we accept converts from Moab or not? Nothing. So Naomi says to her, "What are you doing?" Take a look at number 5. Vadomer. Your sister went back already. She went back to religion. Shuvi achari vimtech. Go, please do not come with me. Vatomer Rus. So what does Rus say to Naomi? Al tifki bi la'azveich lashumech harayich. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Now, it's interesting. Naomi speaks sharply to Rus, and Rus speaks a little bit sharply back to Naomi as well. Stop. Al tifki, like to be pogea in someone, almost means to like offend them or hurt them. Stop it. Stop saying these things to me to make me turn around. Ki el asher telichi eleich, wherever you go, I will go. Uba asher talini alin, wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Amech ami, your nation is my nation. Ve'elokayech elokai, and your God is my God. Uba asher tamusi amos, wherever you die, I will die. V'shamak, I'll be buried there as well. Kol ya'aseh Hashem li, v'cho yosif. I swear to God, this is what I'm going to do. Ki amoves yafrid beni ubenech. The only thing, Naomi, that will separate me and you, is death. And we read this story and we think to ourselves, what goes through your mind when you read this? Amazing. This angels were, you're a tzaddikus. I think to myself, you need to speak to someone, Rus, right? Because right, this, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. This, why? First of all, in general, in Yiddishkeit, we don't proselytize. God loves all people. Every human being is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's child. And you don't have to be Jewish to be beloved by God. You don't have to be Jewish to have a chelik in Olam Haba. You don't have to be Jewish, right? In fact, you could be a righteous Gentile and much easier, much less responsibility and expectations. Shav Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are pretty, most of them are normal people, perform anyway. And just go, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. And in general, by the way, it's one of the questions on Megillas Rus, that the story makes no sense. So again, we'll leave that question for a different time. But what is it that's happening here exactly? So Rashi actually understands in number 6. Rashi quotes the Medrash, Rashi quotes the Gemara that says that in fact there was a much bigger conversation over here. That what Naomi was doing was, Naomi was telling Rus about a lot of the details of Yiddishkeit. Right? The halacha is when someone comes to convert, the halacha is we actively try to dissuade them. Right? Why? Because being Jewish is the greatest privilege in the world, and it is also the most awesome and overwhelming responsibility in the world. And the truth is, if you're not born Jewish, there's no obligation to become Jewish. Just be a righteous Gentile and you're golden. So Rashi says there was a whole conversation between Naomi and Rus, where Naomi was going through the halachas, right? So again, she tells her all different kinds of things. Like we have rules about interactions between men and women. That's when Rus says, fine, where you sleep, I'll sleep. In other words, okay, I'll maintain a system of morality. So she says we have like crazy halachas, like Tchum Shabbos. You can't go out of a certain boundary. So Naomi says, no problem. Wherever you walk, I'll walk. And every single crazy halacha, not crazy halacha, but what sounds to the world like a crazy halacha, that Naomi throws out to Rus. Rus is like, great, I don't understand why people do this stuff, but I'll do it. I'm in. But the Zohar I don't know if Rashbi. The Zohar writes in number 7 something incredible. The Zohar writes, Davar acher, b'asher telichi eleich begalusa. What Rus was saying to Nami was like this: Nami, wherever you go, I'll go. And Rus wasn't just talking about herself; she was talking about herself as a representative of Klal Yisrael. She almost saw herself as Klal Yisrael, and Naomi almost like the Shechina. Naomi, wherever you go, I'll go. So you go to Galus, I'll go to Galus. Because Basher Talini Alin, Demishkava Dilach Begalusa. If you set up your residence, you sleep in Galus, I'll go in Galus as well. Velokayach Elokai, you have a commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'll have a commitment to. What is the Zohar saying? What Naomi was expressing to Rus is, you don't understand, Rus, what's happening. I'm sorry, what Rus was expressing to Naomi was, you don't understand where I'm holding. I'm holding in a level of unbridled, unqualified commitment. I'm in. So whatever you're going to say is not going to throw me. And whatever you're going to say is not going to shock me. Did Rus learn things about Yiddishkeit that I'm sure left her scratching her head? Absolutely. We learn things about Yiddishkeit that leave us scratching our head. Right? Of course there are. But it didn't matter. I'm in. I'm committed to the vision. I'm committed to the dream. I'm committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's it. And once that level of commitment is there, the details almost become irrelevant. And that's why Rus says to Naomi, Atifki Ibi, stop it. Stop it. You think you're going to scare me off with some halachos or some details or some obligations? I'm committed. And I'm fully committed. And once you are fully committed, there is nothing that could dissuade you ultimately again from actualizing the dream and the vision. And this helps to explain Rus. Now, where that level of commitment came from is a different discussion. And that's why, Rus, like you think about it for a moment, like what's the vision? Like when you close your eyes, you think about Rus coming back to Eretz Yisrael, going to the fields, right? How do you envision her? I'm sorry? Tired? Okay, fair. I don't know. I always envision her like very happy and carefree, because like she always, I don't know, just like there's never anything like, oh, there's nothing to eat here, right? Or like, I can't believe that this is it. Or like, it almost seems like there's a certain carefreekeit that she carries with her. Now understand, she's a pauper. She's gleaning in the field. And yet, amazingly enough, as she's gleaning, she's tsanua, and she's from, and she's doing all, she's committed. So when you're committed, that's it. There's nothing else to talk about. When there's a full commitment, so nothing is going to rattle me. Nothing is going to unnerve me because I am all in. And I think that this is a very big reason why we read Megillas Rus on Shavuos. What is the Yom Tov of Shavuos about? Right? What? I know we're getting in a lot tonight. We're getting lag through Shavuos. Right? What is Shavuos all about? Right? What is Yom Tov all about? Shavuos is a very strange Yom Tov. Right? There's no like mitzvah. There's no cheesecake. Okay, but right, that's not a mitzvah. Right? So, there's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah of the day, which is so strange. Right? So it's a Yom Tov that celebrates Kabbalah HaTorah. Shkoyach. Right? I don't know. We have Torah every day. So why is it different today, the Shavuos, than today? What is the Shavuos is the Yom Tov where we recommit ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like a renewal of our vows. I'm recommitting. Because what ends up happening over the course of the year is I become a little bit like the wife in the story of Rashbi. I love you, but the truth is there are certain things I expect from this relationship, God, and to be honest, you're not coming through. You're not giving me what it is that I need. It's not materializing the way that I thought it would be. And as a result, I don't know, maybe I'm not as vested in the relationship. The whole avoda of the Yom Tov of Shavuos is a rededication to the relationship. And what does it mean to rededicate yourself to the relationship? It means I'm all in. Now understand, I'm all in doesn't mean I'm going to do everything. And I'm all in doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. But I'm all in means I am 100% committed to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You think the couple that came to Rashbi didn't have a fight on the way home about something, right? I'm sure they did. I don't know, the husband didn't ask for directions or something like that. Whatever it is, like, hey, I'm sure at the end of the day, whether it was that afternoon, 2 days later, it wasn't the honeymoon until 120. Of course it wasn't. But you could be fully committed to something, even though I'm not totally perfect in the relationship. Sometimes what we miss in our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a sense of complete commitment. Ki ani avdicha ben amasecha. I am yours. I'm in all the way. No, it doesn't mean I'm not going to speak Lashon Hara. I'm going to try. It doesn't mean I'm going to do every single mitzvah. But I know when it sounds like you're speaking out of two sides of your mouth when you say you're all committed, but yet not perfect. It's not. None of us could be perfect. But I could be fully committed and fully vested and fully involved, even though I'm not perfect. That's what Rus was. And that's why I read this story of Rus on Shavuos. And in fact, if you take a look at number 8, this is the last source. Take a look. This is absolutely beautiful. So remember, this is by Matan Torah. So by Har Sinai, so the pasuk says like this: Vigbalta es ha'am saviv lemor. So remember again, this is by Har Sinai. Kadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you can't let people come up on the mountain. You can't let them come up on the mountain. So what should you do? Vigbalta es ha'am saviv lemor. So set boundaries around the mountain and tell the people, saying, Hishamru lachem alos bahar unegoa bekatzeu. Tell the people that they cannot go up on the mountain or even touch a piece of the mountain. Why? Because kol hanogea bahar mos yumas. Because whoever goes ahead and touches the mountain, ultimately again, is going to die. He's going to die. So here's what's fascinating. So the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh asks a simple question. He says, I don't understand. If you tell people, it's redundant. Why is it redundant? What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to say? What does he have to say? Don't touch the mountain. Just say, don't touch the mountain. Obviously, if I can't touch the mountain, I obviously what? Can't ascend it either. Why do you have to say, don't ascend the mountain and don't touch it? So the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, Kedarka B'Kodesh. Everything is how you punctualize the pasuk. So if you take a look at number 8, look what the Rebbe does. Vigbalta sa'am saviv leimar. So Moshe Rabbeinu, here's the message you need to give to Klal Yisrael. Here's the message. Hishamru lachem alos bahar. Here's what I want you to do. In Yiddishkeit, if you want to be successful, you need to climb the mountain. You need to get yourself on the mountain. Why? Because unago b'kvikatseu, if all you're going to do is touch the mountain a little bit, kol hanogea bahar mos yumas. If you're just going to touch the mountain, if you're just kind of going to like have a little bit of a distance relationship with the mountain, that's not going to result in anything. If you want Torah, if you want Yiddishkeit, if you want Ruchnius, if you want inspiration, if you want the Kadosh Baruch Hu, you have to be willing to get on the mountain. The problem is we go through life in so many different ways, and we kind of touch the mountain. It's nice to touch the mountain, right? I like to touch the mountain here. I'll get a little inspiration here, a little inspiration there, but I'm not all in. How many of us could say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ani avdecha ben amasecha. I'm yours. And literally you'll say, but what does that mean? It means just that. A statement of saying, I give myself over to the Ribono. I'm yours. I'm fully committed to this relationship. Again, am I going to be excellent? Am I going to be perfect? No, but I'm fully committed. And you look at this, and this becomes the theme of BaOmer all the way through Shavuos. What was Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva was complete commitment to a vision of greatness of building Klal Yisrael. What was Rashbi? Rashbi furthered the mission of his Rebbe. And Rashbi taught us that same concept in marriage. That in marriage, if I want my marriage to work, I'd have to be fully committed. Again, of course, does it happen that marriage doesn't work for circumstances beyond their control? Of course. But we're talking in a general sense. That love can't be qualified, that it can't be I love you because, or I love you if, or I'm here if this occurs, that occurs. It can't be that. I want a meaningful and beautiful marriage. I have to be all in. And all in means when things are good and when things are terrible. I'm absolutely unequivocally all in. And Rus teaches us, Rabbi Akiva teaches us by Klal Yisrael, a national level. Rashbi teaches us on a very personal level, like in a marriage. Rus teaches us on a personal religious level. You know, I've often mentioned this. Our greatest problem with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's our greatest problem? Because Rav said this a million times over the years, is we have commitment issues. Commitment issues, right? What do we say to Hashem? Ribono Shalom, I love you. Of course, how can you not love God? I love you. But you know what? I think we should see other people. You know, I'm not quite ready to settle down. I'm not quite ready to settle down. And I want to see what else is out there. I want to see, I want to maybe do a little bit this with you, but not this with you. I'm not ready. And it's so foolish. Because without commitment, there's no growth. Without commitment, there's no happiness. Without commitment, there's no self-actualization. So Rus teaches us, give yourself over. Personally, Takash Baruch Hu. Be committed. Be committed. And by the way, Rus is the perfect example. What did Rus know about Yiddishkeit? How much did she know about Yiddishkeit? Nothing. That's why, by the way, you understand, Rus's conversion really occurs sometime later on. Because as much as she pledges her allegiance to Naomi, there's got to be a conversion that happens later on, right? According to most opinions, she married her Jewish husband while she was still not Jewish. So again, she's committing herself before she knows anything. So Rus is the perfect example that you need not possess all of the information in order to make a complete commitment. You don't have to read all the fine print before you give yourself over to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then comes Matan Torah, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kindalach, here's the choice. You got to make a choice. Are you going up the mountain? Or are you touching the mountain? Are you going to spend your life at an arm's length relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Touching, my hand's on the mountain, right? I'm on base, right? My hand's on the mountain. So is that what you want? Is that what you want? Or do you want a real relationship where you go up the mountain? And again, we get so scared of that because, what does that mean? I can't do everything. None of us can do everything, right? How many Averas did each of us commit today? I mean, don't volunteer that information, but you understand, right? How many Averas are we still going to commit tonight, right? There are plenty of, the night's early, right? There's plenty of time, right? We're all going to sin. We're all going to make mistakes. It's only a question of how often and how severe. Commitment doesn't require perfection. Commitment just requires commitment. And that's the choice. Do you want to touch the mountain or do you want to scale the mountain? And when you think about this, from BaOmer through Shavuos, it's in everything in life. It's in our ruchnias, as Rashbi taught us, it's in our marriages. It's in our marriages about the need that if we want something in our careers, you know, so often, and I think this is a little bit, I feel like an old person saying this, but you see this a lot with younger people today, that there's an expectation of like immediate success, right? That I should be 25 and making a lot of money already. Or, you know, I should be this, and my first job should be like a smashing success. Or my first endeavor should be, and it doesn't work that way. And you see what ends up happening is that people encounter failures and they give up. And in everything, they give up in marriage, they give up in career, they give up in ruchnius. But that's not the way life works. Rabbi Akiva, Rashbi, Rus, all of them are whispering the same exact message in our ear. You gotta be committed to a vision of marriage, a vision for yourself, a vision of ruchnius, a vision of relationship with Baruch Hu. And it's all the same basic message. Ali Bahar, don't spend life touching the mountain. Find the courage to scale it. Don't spend life kind of like dabbling in a number of different things and committing to none. Choose a life dream, right? How many of us have dreams or had dreams and then they didn't materialize either the way we wanted it or as quickly as, what do we do? What do we do? We give up. We give up. Why? Oh, because it was difficult. Well, who said it was supposed to be easy? Whoever said that self-actualization and the fulfillment of your dreams is supposed to come easily? Who said that? No one said it, because anyone who would say it would be lying. What we require is commitment to a vision. You have a vision for yourself in life? You have a dream for yourself in life? Then say to yourself, I am committed to this until the wheels fall off. I am committed to this until it happens. Whatever it is. Imagine if we brought that level of commitment to every area of our lives, where we would be. Where we would be in our relationships, where we'd be in our careers, where we would be in our relationship with Baruch Hu, in our ruchnius. And that's the message of Lag BaOmer. That's the message of Rus. That's the message of Shavuos. As we go into the Emeretz Hashem, the Yom Tov of Lag BaOmer, and hopefully we'll all have the opportunity. There's a big inyan to Emeretz Hashem. Make sure to be by a bonfire Lag BaOmer. The Sfarim bring down that when one looks into the light of the fire Lag BaOmer, it opens up chambers in the heart, chambers in the neshama. It allows us to access ruchnius that we didn't even know that we had. So tomorrow night we'll be zochet to stare into the holy fire of the Medura, of the bonfire. We'll hear the echoes of Rashbi, the echoes of Rabbi Akiva, the echoes of Rus. And we have to draw on their strength to figure out what are our dreams, what are our goals, what are our aspirations in every area of life. And then to find the strength to not just touch them, but to scale them. To find the strength not to dabble, but to be unequivocally committed. And just as that commitment led to Rabbi Akiva's success, Rashbi's success, Rus's success. And remember, Rus's success of that commitment, just understand the power of commitment, one woman's unbridled commitment, right? One woman's being all in will one day give us Mashiach. Mashiach comes from one woman's willingness to not give up on a vision. One woman's willingness to be all in. That's one person. One woman gave us Mashiach. Not 5 women, not 10 women, not a community, not a kehillah, not Klal Yisrael. One person. One person who refused to give in when things got tough. One woman who refused or who was adamant to remain committed even when things were difficult. Well, the Meretz Hashem gave us Meher Rabbi Aminu incredible redemption. If Rus could do it with unyielding commitment, then there is no telling what we could accomplish as well. Wishing everyone a licht lag BaOmer, a beautiful Yom Tov of Shavuos, and shkayach to everyone.